from the Himalayas to the high sea, will have a signal that never dies. I invite the chair, Shri R. Shakya, Additional DG, Haryana, LSA Department of Telecommunications. The moderator, Mr. Abhishek Malhotra, Senior Advocate. The panel speakers, Mr. Jitendra Ahuja, Head, Products and Solution NELCO. Mr. Prafull Kumar, VP and Business Head, Reliance Jio. Mr. Shivaji Chatterjee, President and MD, Hughes Communication India. Mr. Alexander Jeuck, ICT and SpaceTech Professional. Mr. Sachida and Padhi, Advisor, Fraunhofer. I request all the speakers to keep their remarks concise and within the allocated time, which is 45 minutes, that is of this session. Without further ado, I hand over the proceedings to the moderator.
Thank you so much. We are missing out on one of our speakers. His flight was running a little late, so he'll join us, as he very eloquently put it on our group, D to D, direct to the dais. So as and when he does join us, I think we can have the benefit of his inputs as well. May I please request, because we have a shortage of time, I would have liked to ideally read everyone's bio or parts thereof, but since we are, as I said, paucity of time, may I request each of the speakers to kindly introduce themselves, and we'll start with Mr. Shakya, the chairperson of this session.
Thank you, Abhishek. Good morning to all. My name is Shakya, presently working in the capacity of Additional Director General in the Department of Telecommunications and heading the licensing service area of the Haryana state. I belong to 1988 of the Indian Telecom Services. I had been fortunate to work in the capacity of Senior Advisor to United Nations ITU and had set up the South Asia ITU office and Innovation Center at New Delhi. I had also worked as the head of the regulatory for the government of Mauritius, ICT Authority. And besides that, I think the multiple departments within the DOT, including the international relations, security, satellites, and I feel very privileged and honored to be part of today's discussions. And I'm sure we will get enriched with your participation and the knowledge of my co-panelists here. Thank you, Abhishek.
Since we have a latecomer directly to the dais, I'd request him, subject to you having caught your breath, to please introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Shivaji Chatterjee, CEO of Hughes Communications India. Hope to have a good panel, Abhishek.
Mr. Prafull.
Yeah, hello. Good morning, everyone. My name is Prafull Kumar, and I'm working as a VP in Reliance Jio and looking after GSO and NGSO satellite technology and associated spectrum part of it. Thank you.
Alexander.
Good morning. My name is Alexander Jeuck. I'm expert in SATCOMs and ICT systems, and I call myself engineer of applied science. That means we all know R&D, that is a hard job to do, but at the end of the day, what I like to see is to get missions in place, missions happening, and services delivered, not only for the sake of the customers, of course, we are all taken care of, but it's also for the sake of keeping business running and to do sustainable business. Myself, I worked for nearly 30 years in the VSAT industry, in the SATCOM industry. And of course, when all these D2D ideas coming up, I've been also skeptical. On some business cases, I'm still skeptical. But it's now the third time I think I'm attending also this D2D session here at the conference and congress. And every year there is a lot of new developments, and I'm happy to be part of these discussions. Thank you.
Jitendra?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I am Jitendra Ahuja, working with NELCO as Senior VP Product and Solutions. I work on new product initiatives and new business initiatives. Today's session is very special because G2 is something that close, to my heart, and something, next wave of transformation for satellite industry. So looking forward to have, very interesting discussion in this panel. Thank you.
Sachida?
Hi, good morning. My name is Sachida Padhi. I work with Fraunhofer as a principal consultant. As you all know, Fraunhofer is the home of MP3, and we have communication codecs, we have streaming codecs, we have audio codecs, and I'm going to talk more on the communication codec for the D2D NTN today. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the speakers for that quick introduction. How we want to take this panel forward is, the importance of D2D from a regulatory perspective, from a commercial perspective, from a licensing perspective. All are the questions that have been thrown up for consideration by the latest consultation paper that was released earlier this year by the TRAI. And that's why this session is extremely topical. So what we'd like to do is begin with Mr. Shakya, who can perhaps lay the foundation as the chairperson of this session on what are the issues, what are the perspectives, and, as he sort of rightly indicated to me a little earlier, without taking any sides, without giving any answers, just throwing out the issues there, and then we can have a more engaging panel discussion to address some of those. So.
Yes.
Good morning again. After having the wonderful opening ceremony, that too with the address of Ambassador, in addition to the other eminent speakers, it gives me immense pleasure to be part of today's discussion, especially considering the fact that device to or direct connect to device is something like, if you go a few years ago to ask direct to home services of the broadcasting. Why I'm trying to draw the analogy is, at that time people were finding it very difficult how an individual is going to have the connectivity to in its own house directly coming from the satellite, which is not in terms of the distance very high, but also in terms of the receiving cost of the equipment and the cost of the satellite itself. I think we are again on the same page. When we call direct to device connectivity using the satellite to the individuals, I remember few years ago we had the discussion, can we think of having the device or the user device in terms of the satellite similar to what we have the mobile phone? And you all know today it is a reality and going to be more in the coming days. So what is the major challenge left now is the cost of the device, what is going to be there at the hand of individual user. So one of the foremost requirements for this industry to grow is to bring down the cost of the devices to as similar or maybe less than the what a mobile phone today cost. Number two important thing is whether the efficacy, efficiency, or the technology superiority, what mobile services are offering today would be able to be offered by these direct-to-device mechanism of having the services, whether they are broadband, whether they are IoT devices, or in terms of any kind of even the 6G coming technology specifications. Third thing important is, so far we had been hearing, the moment satellite comes, we always fear whether it will work with the dense forest, whether it will work with the rains. Typically, if they are, say, continuous and having the large size of the, you can say, the particles which are getting dropped, whether we will be able in terms of reducing the cost of the satellite itself. Many answers are there. I think the last decade has given reply to most of these questions in a very positive manner. And the effort of all of you is required to make them further down. And from the regulatory perspective, all of us have the same question. So far, the satellite industry has been continuously enjoying the administrative allocations, whether the similar allocations would be continued or should they be continued. There is an argument, same services, same rules. So if the satellite service provider is rendering broadband services, if they are rendering similar IoT services, does that rule apply or do not apply? In terms of growth, especially in looking at the geopolitical scenario, wherein owning on technologies had become a very important aspect strategically. In the environment where most of the low Earth orbits kind of satellites are owned by a typical geography, would it be advisable to go for similar kind of deployments by the individual countries, or the countries can take the advantage of that specific group of constellations which already exists? So in terms of strategy, what country should follow is also a kind of question we have today. So in terms of questions, I think I would like to begin with, let you all have these questions with you, and my co-panelists, they all are very learned. They represent the different part of the satellite communication systems, from the operators, from the sales, and I'm really delighted to learn that a law firm is doing the say moderation job. So you have the judicious understanding on the topic. So with this, let me wish all of you, a good discussion likely to happen there. And with this, I take my seat back and let I also be part of you to listen and conclude afterwards where we did reach. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir, for setting the stage for this panel discussion. Um, I'm sure a lot of people in this crowd would be asking the same question that you alluded to, that what is a lawyer doing in this session, which is all about technicalities, it's about commercial aspects, it's about the regulatory and the licensing aspects. But it's interesting that the growth of this industry, specifically in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, has witnessed, of course, as we all know, a spurt in activity at the startup level. And that is where the law firm that I earlier used to represent and had founded, TMT Law Practice, we thought it appropriate to partner with them as a startup ourselves and to try and understand what those challenges would be so that we could address those concerns hand in hand. But coming back to the importance of this panel, how I'd like to initially we thought we'll do it in a regular question answer session, but since we do have a paucity of time, I'd like to get perspectives from each of the speakers and their unique perspective and what they bring to the table, and then maybe towards the end we can provide a summary and then take questions from the audience. So I'd like to start with you, Prafull. My question to you is, do we even need a D2D set of regulations, business, regulatory questions, etc.? Is there even a requirement, or are we adequately covered? Is it a problem that we are trying to solve which is already solved? And while you answer that question, perhaps you can bring in elements of what Jeuck's perspective is and what opportunities, if any, that you see for growth.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think it's a very broad question, so I'll try to concise it. So, in my perspective, D2D is not a normal application. It's something different, and which is bringing the two separated industry, terrestrial and satellite, together and making it convergence. And if you see, there are few challenges when we talk about D2D. And if I describe D2D in a challenges part, so there are three challenges. One is the technology, which is probably solved because there has been demonstration where the normal mobile phone in reality can connect to satellite, and it can work for even it has been tested for video and voice. The second, but the point here is this is under trial, it has been tested, but the demonstration is one part, and the commercial operation when there are multiple devices, million devices, then how the D2D network is going to behave is still need to be checked and verified. How once millions devices are talking to satellite, whether that powerful satellite is there, whether it is going to serve few hundreds or few tens or few millions. So that is still open. Second very critical point is the spectrum and coexistence, which is evolving but yet not solved. And if we talk about the spectrum, so D2D generally works in the two different model. One is using MSS spectrum, which is probably L and S band mostly. And second is the IMT spectrum. So if we talk about the MSS spectrum, of course it has a regulatory certainty. There is a proper rule and regulations to operate. But where it lacks is a limited spectrum. We have around, including L and S combined, maybe 80 to 90 megahertz spectrum. And second is device system is still evolving. There has to be a proper chip which need to be included in the mobile devices to work with the MSS. So this is a part of L and S band. Now coming to IMT spectrum, which really directly support a normal devices to connect to satellite. But the issue which is still need to be resolved is the spectrum, how it is going to be used. And already it is being discussed at WRC 27 agenda item 1.13, where probably that may be the trigger point to scale the D2D, because that's a very important, and device ecosystem is already there. The only issue is, again, it has been tested with the IMT, but there are, if you see the satellite, it covers not only the limited area, it covers a very wide area. Different national geography a single beam can cover. And if we compare with the BTS, so thousands of BTS stations together combined a single beam where the millions of devices can connect to. So we need to see in the overlapping frequency band within a country how it is going to work, as well as how the spectrum framework is going to solve the problem of the border areas. And if you see our country, it has already connected with the multiple countries. So how that border sharing is going to work in the overlapping frequency band is a very critical. And WRC 27 might be a trigger point to frame the spectrum and coexistence scenario, which is going to scale probably D2D. So that's the perspective of how D2D is today. When we talk about our own country, whether it is really needed, so my answer will be absolutely yes. And still, if you see, there are 4 to 5% area which are uncovered and which are not economically possible to connect through other medias due to multiple reasons, due to the geography. But if you see, probably D2D is going to be more impactful for the border areas, for the maritime type of connectivity, for the fishing vessel, as well as for the strategic application in the border region. So of course, D2D is going to be very helpful for the network connectivity and expand network. But these are the aspects which I just said need to be verified for the commercial operation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thank you for the introduction to also the usage of the technology and what challenges currently remain. So if I may kind of sum up your essential sort of point, of course, is that yes, the answer to the question that I raised, that is D2D really required, is yes, but you see that there are certain challenges which are unresolved in relation to the final deployment. And, of course, questions around that. Over to Shivaji. Hughes has been a player around, of course, all over the world and specifically in India for some time. What do you see from Hughes' perspective as the opportunities that the development of this technology will throw up? Do you also see any misconceptions around the use and the deployment of this technology? And potentially, how does one address those from your perspective?
Yeah, right now, a lot of narrative, I'll just answer the second part first, is around terrestrial versus satellite, or incumbent telcos versus this new technology. But I think that's it's all about it being complementary and working together. And I feel the main reason is the main company which is bringing about D2D commercially is Starlink, and brought about by Elon Musk. Otherwise, I think if there were smaller companies and they've existed, this would not have been such a topic. But I'll say, to draw parallel to IPL, we have a 15-year-old boy, Vaibhav Suryavanshi, who plays the ball, not the bowler. And that's the reason for his success on day one. And similarly here, the ball is what the technology can and can't do. So I think people are playing the bowler and not the ball. If we really study it, it's, by just physics or science, which is what governs the technology. It's a very niche technology. It's still evolving from an emergency SOS and texting, and it is far from reaching broadband. Also, the problem it's solving is one of coverage. Its role is where the last tower ends. So very clearly, I think with the goal of India being inclusion and answering your first question too, I think it's more like 20% of India doesn't have adequate mobile coverage. And if you add the maritime, that percentage is much higher. So if we are trying to get 100% coverage and ubiquity, and coming to the first part in terms of applications, I'll say as Hughes, we've been focused on B2B here. And I think there's tremendous applications, whether it's in the border areas for the defense, whether it's just disaster recovery and resilience. I think a lot of national security applications, the maritime situation awareness, which is a very big element in today's times. Wherever you have anyone going in and out of coverage, if there's a truck driving through, you need continuous coverage, and that's not possible today. Terrestrial byways created around clusters, and there are always going to be black spots. So that's the whole, I think if you look at this set of applications of disaster management, national security and border, maritime, energy for mining, gas pipelines, etc., and digital inclusion. I think there's an abundant set of applications, and for us, we see it as something which really is not transformative as a technology, because I think this was anyway, it's not a very complicated technology. It's the way the standards convergence is happening. I think it's transformative in its commercial use, because for satellite, you always had the user terminal as the entry barrier, which is gone. So I think that's the transformation.
Follow up on that, I mean, with regard to the, any views that you have on the importance that is being accorded to this, specifically being identified as a separate sort of piece in the satellite communications consultation paper released by the TRAI, because it's not bundled under the original VSAT, GCM-based sort of models, but it's identified as a separate one under D2D. So is that an indicator, according to you, for an eventual, of course, deployment, but more importantly, from users' perspective as to what the opportunities could present themselves?
Yeah, I think India is trying to find the space and balance, and so is the world. That's what Prafull mentioned in WRC 27. And, we have to find the right balance between including this. I think it's very good for telcos, it's very good for users. And find the right regulatory balance that the incumbents who have invested in terrestrial spectrum are also protected. So I feel the frameworks are evolving. These are just consultation to bring up different ways. There's one which is also the satellite capacity framework with a tiered licensing, which is a little different from the VNO restrictive model today. So I really feel it's evolving, Abhishek. I think now's not the time to say that's what it's intending. I think we're just trying to find out what's happening around the world, what are the options here. And I'm sure the way the government does in trying to bring in new technology, we say we want to lead the world in 6G. 6G cannot happen without NTN and D2D. So if you're leading the world with 6G, you got to lead the world with an inclusive regulation. So I think the government has answered it rather than me.
No, thank you so much, and that's a great segue to go over to Alexander, that we wanted your perspective on what's the international dimension to this, and given your experience, what would be the broad, maybe a couple of points, 2-3 points of inputs that you would like to give to policymakers in India to perhaps look at and address this regulatory and licensing aspects?
Okay, thank you for the question. So I think what's important is really that we have to differentiate. Even it's D2D, but it's a different story if we see the usage of MSS spectrum or if we see the usage of MNO spectrum or IMT spectrum, like you call it, because it is a completely different, let's say, chance. Because the spectrum in MSS is very limited and it's already used quite often. So for example, also here in India, you are using your S-band spectrum rather well. Yeah, in the meantime, it took a while, but good. Now, again, the question is how can you split up that spectrum between, let's say, B2C and B2B, or business for government and institutions. And there, of course, the MSS spectrum, L-band, fantastic, yeah, S-band. At the same time, there are still so many unconnected people around the world, and inclusion without connectivity is very challenging. And I think this is one of the big motivations around the world. The other big motivation is what was also mentioned. The terminals are in principle there, yeah, the remote terminals. If they are cheap, yeah, I'm not sure, because at the end of the day, they are already procured. That's the point, because I think Hughes would be happy if you can sell your terminals for the price of an iPhone. But here we're having millions of phones out in the market. There's an own ecosystem that has been built up, dominated at the moment by Chinese suppliers still, yeah. But also I think India should work on also on the production of the handsets, on the chipsets. See it as it's a complementing service that is very important. Hybrid networks, and I think the whole discussion on 3G PPP, 5G, 6G, NTN network, non-terrestrial network, at the end of the day, will not work without going into these discussions, how spectrum can be shared, how it can be utilized, and how it can be also protected. Because there's a reason why you should not bring satellite phones into the country. So, same time, I think the regulator and the laws in each country, they are slightly different, and it needs to be managed by these institutions together with the local industry, with the local demands, and they are quite different. But I think what we can see is that 2023 was the first time I was sitting on the D2D panel. And now what happened over the last 3 years, I think this is amazing, yeah? How like Vodafone is signing up with IST Space, yeah? What we have seen in the Gulf with Suraya merging with Yasat. At the same time, they are finding an agreement with Viasat to protecting spectrum. There had been billions of dollars spent additionally for MSS spectrum protection, and that shows there's a lot of belief that it will be also a service that will stay sustainably. Who is making at the end the business? Yeah, that we don't know exactly. Yeah, we have to see. Yeah, yeah, that's maybe for a start. Yeah.
So also your views on what perhaps inputs you would like to give to policymakers while approaching this, because we, as you rightly said, it's a very nascent stage that we are at, not just in India, perhaps the world over, but given your experience and your, kind of a cross-jurisdictional input that you have.
Yeah, okay, from a policy maker, at the end of the day, it's the question, will you embrace technology and possibilities, and at the same time you will have to balance it with your country's needs, yeah? And these are specific. What we have seen is that some countries are acting much faster than others. I think here the discussions are ongoing. From the motivation, India is a satellite country, no doubt, simply of the size because of the land and sea. Same time, we also have to see that from a policymaker, I think the policymaker also has to respect all the investments that had been already done into the terrestrial networks. Because, for example, we have seen in Europe, yeah, you have maybe in India, in certain cities, the much better mobile network than in European cities, because in Europe there had been a lot of investments decades before in copper and cable, which is now in principle an investment which will not play off anymore. But at the end of the day, I think one of the highest targets also for a policymaker is not only to make things happen, but to try to make things happen on a sustainable basis. And now to be the first one to enter that whole thing is maybe not the best advice. Like you mentioned, we are in demonstration advices, we are in how does it work. But yes, you need, it's an effort that needs to be continuous, it needs to be open, and I think it needs to be transparent with the industry who is investing a lot of money. Yes, and then it needs to happen. I maybe coming from an FSS satellite operator, there was always a scarcity of capacity over India, and then companies like SES also, we invested a lot of money at that time. But the timeline, yeah, the predictability when the service can be launched, I think that would be something from a policy very important. Okay.
Yeah, I think at least what we've seen in other jurisdictions gives an indicator, and one part that has been echoed at least by all the speakers till now is that it does not have to be viewed as in competition with terrestrial networks, but in addition to or in complementary to. So I think how the FCC has sort of even framed this policy is supplemental coverage from space. So that gives an indication of how this is being viewed perhaps worldwide. In fact, interestingly, I was reading one piece, I think perhaps it was an article on the ITU website, which talked about even regulatory sandboxes to demonstrate the capabilities of this technology to be created, and it was being introduced in Zambia. Saudi Arabia is also working on this. So I think there's a lot of work, as you rightly said, Alexander, across the world. And at the end of the day, very valuable advice that when a policymaker in our country is looking at this, we have to see it from the point of view of what works for us. And of course, look at whatever is happening around the world, but necessarily suit it to our needs and requirements. With that, I'd like to move to Sachida. He brings a very unique perspective to this panel. We've been discussing, the regulatory aspects and perhaps how the licensing can work and what are the challenges that are currently facing. One challenge which perhaps was alluded to by you, Prafull, and perhaps is also an underlying question that potentially could come also from the audience is, it's all well and good that we are likely to adopt this new technology. It's great that perhaps this will be complementary to the existing mobile terrestrial networks, and it will have that last mile connectivity. But what about the cost? Is that something that, like any new technology that is being adopted, and specifically where satellite networks are involved and bandwidth and capacity, and in the event that we move from administrative allocation to any other model, maybe the costs associated with satellite capacity are likely to grow. So in that light, do we have people, companies working on areas to democratize this further, to address the cost aspect? So I'll hand it over to you, to Sachida, sorry.
Thank you, Abhishek. I think this is a very interesting question because in India, anything that gets rolled out, at the end of the day, the users are looking for a better cost, so that with that cost, they can consume that particular services. And we have 1.5 billion phones, and it has to be very much affordable. So as I have introduced myself that I am from a company called Fraunhofer, we basically focus on bringing very high efficient codec. And these codecs are in streaming, in audio, and also in the communication. So I will today focus more on a voice call, because our codec is related to the voice call, to support applications like emergency response, bidirectional voice calls, or push to talk. So Fraunhofer has put enormous manpower and the latest AI to come up with a new codec that can be used in NTN space. So this codec name is called NESC, Neural End-to-End Speech Codec. This is powered by AI, and it is an ultra low bit codec which takes only 1 kbps for a voice call over the NTN satellite connectivity. So what does it mean to the user? If you see the traditional network, that is a 3GPP network, the voice calls that has been handled nearly about, takes around 13 kbps averagely. Whereas if the new codec, NESC, can take 1 kbps, so it is almost all more than 10 times space segment savings actually. So that is the way we can democratize and bring the cost down and make it affordable for the users to use it and get a universal connectivity all across, and also use a voice codec which is very robust, which is very clear toll quality, and people are happy with that, and there is no disconnections. So this particular technology has been tested already in the world, and there is a company called Skylo. They have already created the gateway, and they are putting this gateway with the MNOs, and there has to be a conversion of codec has to happen at somewhere. That's what is happening at the gateway, so that the call generated from the terrestrial network can land on the non-terrestrial network using the satellite connectivity and vice versa. So the idea is to provide a very robust quality of communication over the NTN network with an affordable cost, which makes the adoption much easier. But saying so, it is not so easy, because this codec needs to be integrated with the handheld device at the core side. So all those integration works is taking little time. There are companies have already implemented it in 36 countries, and we have started working with 3GPP also to make this codec to be adopted for the NTN space. And as we have a great experience of working with the 3GPP with our EVS codec, we know the ways and means of working with 3GPP and make them, to select and choose this particular codec on the 3GPP, but it will take some time. Once this codec is adopted by 3GPP, it will be much easier to create a device ecosystem, gateways, and everything, so that there will be a seamless connectivity for the voice all across the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Sachida. That's a great insight into what we can expect to not just have D2D licensed, regulated, etc., but also implemented in a cost-effective manner. Jitendra, whenever till now, I think the perspective that we've presented to the audience is from the point of view of the user being an individual, you and me. NELCO is a leader in the enterprise solutions aspect, and an adoption of technology, specifically in the satellite domain, with regard to industries, enterprises, etc. Where do you see the opportunity for implementation of D2D at the enterprise level? And do you feel that enterprises could maybe use this to alter some of the strategy that they already deploy with the existing technology?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Abhishek, for asking this question, because as you rightly said, till now we are discussing about how D2D can fill the gap, with respect to cellular services. But for enterprise, when we say, there is another domain altogether, which is IoT. To some extent, Shivaji touched on that. we definitely see there are multiple such use cases, multiple segment, wherein D2D will get used. Today, we are serving as research service provider in geostationary, many of the segment, like say ATM, POS, fisheries. And we clearly see once the D2D is available, much of the segment, will move on to D2D. And reason for that is obvious because D2D will offer much more flexibility in terms of form factor, in terms of utilization of the services, cost, and all things. There are other segments also, enterprise, for example, forestry, irrigation, livestock tracking, people tracking, drones, you name. There are so many different use cases which will get enabled by D2D. And we see the market will expand even for IoT exponentially. What we are serving today on geostationary will no more the case. It will expand exponentially. So many different use cases, so many different segments will get opened up with D2D. So D2D is going to be enabler, for all these IoT, various kind of use cases, various segments, and we are very excited about it as service provider. We clearly see that D2D is going to be a next transformation for, enterprise connectivity. Today, what terrestrial is not able to fill, D2D will definitely fill that. Because all these cases, which require very, very reliable connectivity, data is thin, but require form factor has to be.
Which is now, in principle, an investment which will not play off anymore. But at the end of the day, I think one of the highest targets also for a policymaker is not only to make things happen, but to try to make things happen on a sustainable basis. And now to be the first one to enter that whole thing is maybe not the best advice. Like you mentioned, we are in demonstration advices, we are in how does it work. But yes, you need, it's an effort that needs to be continuous, it needs to be open, and I think it needs to be transparent with the industry who is investing a lot of money. Yes, and then it needs to happen. I maybe coming from an FSS satellite operator, there was always a scarcity of capacity over India, and then companies like SES also, we invested a lot of money at that time, but the timeline, the predictability when the service can be launched, I think that would be something from a policy very important. Okay.
Yeah, I think at least what we've seen in other jurisdictions gives an indicator, and one part that has been echoed at least by all the speakers till now is that it does not have to be viewed as in competition with terrestrial networks, but in addition to or in complementary to. So I think how the FCC has sort of even framed this policy is supplemental coverage from space. So that gives an indication of how this is being viewed perhaps worldwide. In fact, interestingly, I was reading one piece, I think perhaps it was an article on the ITU website, which talked about even regulatory sandboxes to demonstrate the capabilities of this technology to be created, and it was being introduced in Zambia. Saudi Arabia is also working on this. So I think there's a lot of work, as you rightly said, Alexander, across the world. And at the end of the day, very valuable advice that when a policymaker in our country is looking at this, we have to see it from the point of view of what works for us. And of course, look at whatever is happening around the world, but necessarily suit it to our needs and requirements. With that, I'd like to move to Sachida. He brings a very unique perspective to this panel. We've been discussing, the regulatory aspects and perhaps how the licensing can work and what are the challenges that are currently facing. One challenge which perhaps was alluded to by you, Prafull, and perhaps is also an underlying question that potentially could come also from the audience is, it's all well and good that we are likely to adopt this new technology. It's great that perhaps this will be complementary to the existing mobile terrestrial networks, and it will have that last mile connectivity. But what about the cost? Is that something that, like any new technology that is being adopted, and specifically where satellite networks are involved and bandwidth and capacity, and, in the event that we move from administrative allocation to any other model, maybe the costs associated with satellite capacity are likely to grow. So in that light, do we have people, companies working on areas to democratize this further, to address the cost aspect? So I'll hand it over to you, to Sachida, sorry.
Thank you, Abhishek. I think this is a very interesting question because in India, anything that gets rolled out, at the end of the day, the users are looking for a better cost, so that with that cost, they can consume that particular services. And we have 1.5 billion phones, and it has to be very much affordable. So as I have introduced myself that I am from a company called Fraunhofer, we basically focus on bringing very high efficient codec. And these codecs are in streaming, in audio, and also in the communication. So I will today focus more on a voice call because our codec is related to the voice call.
Which is now, in principle, an investment which will not play off anymore. But at the end of the day, I think the one of the highest targets also for a policymaker is
Mobile rates, I say even for the terminating call, we used to pay about 20 rupees per minute. The individual handset was costing more than 20,000 rupees. But in the manner the people adopted the technologies, today, I think almost every hand in the country is having a mobile handset, irrespective which economic strata he or she belongs to. I'm sure merely with the population of our country, which you say 1.4 to 1.5, whatever figure you estimate to, and thereon, the adoption, even if it goes, say, 70 or 80% of such kind of the devices, whatever device cost today we are feeling, I'm 100% sure will come down to the level which is very much nominal and affordable to the people. And as an industry, I think I appeal to all of you, make it affordable. It's our duty to have everyone together to reap the fruits of the technologies. As my friend said, if he can miniaturize the need of the requirement, like coming from the 13 kbps to the 1 kbps for the voice, if similar kind of miniaturization is done in terms of the different aspects of the technologies, I'm sure we will be able to achieve the cost economy as well. Regulation perspectives, yes. There are few things with respect to the spectrum. You know, the new Telecommunication Act already narrates a lot about how the spectrum is going to be used or going to be dealt in future as well. At the same time, since there are questions with respect to the same rules, same business, the things are yet to evolve more. The larger the learning, better the decision. The questions are already floated by the TRAI. The TRAI will give its own recommendations. Based on those recommendations, pricing, the government of India then have the second round of the consultations. So in terms of the question what my friend Alexander has made, that the country has to be very transparent in terms of handling the issues. In case of India, I think it is beyond any doubt that we had been transparent. Because whatever allocation we do, or the assignments we do in terms of the spectrum, the first layer is the request to the TRAI to give its recommendation. They go with the wide publication and the wide consultation across the cities, collect their inputs, written, verbal, both, based on their data collection as well as the industrial studies. They put the recommendation to the Government of India. Government of India further have the consultations with the stakeholders, and thereafter the government takes a considered view. And that gives a fairly transparent understanding how the Government of India is going to be. The new act has also made the provision in terms of the visibility, how long the things are going to be, how much spectrum is going to be available where. So even that periodicity has been very well defined. That also gives the predictability of the business in the country. That is, I think, the answer to my friend Alexander here. And then the important aspect in terms of the security being the technology which goes beyond the borders. Yes, like any other country, we do have the concerns. And we do deal these concerns with the highly effective and the efficient tools, technologies, as well as strategy. What specific thing need to be dealt? It is being dealt at the highest level with, again, the participation of the private and the public dialogues. It is not only the Department of Telecommunications who deals with the subject, but in our country we do have the National Security Council Secretariat, and therein we do have the National Cyber Security Coordinator, who himself is chairing all the decisions in respect of the security relating to the communication there too. Some concerns with respect to the number of satellites being owned by the specific geography, they are under study. And all of you know, as a country, we believe that we must be self-reliant, Atmanirbhar Bharat. I think the Atmanirbhar Bharat is the answer for all those issues. And I make a request to all of you. Let us do not think what the direct-to-device is going to have in terms of coming from the outside, but can we think of having this as an opportunity for designing the chipset, especially when we have a large investment in last 4 years in the semiconductors and the fab labs. So coming with those inputs, can we develop more chips, more design sets? Can we have the device manufacturing itself in addition to the device designing? Can we look for better modulation techniques to have the better outputs? Those all opportunities are available for all of us together to join the hands with the government. And yes, in the end, I think what I would like to sum up is anything is doable only when we join hands together. So we request industry members, we request individuals, we request academia, and even the regulatory law houses to support, where we can come out with a very crystal clear, transparent, and making benefit to all together, like what the Prime Minister says, for the development of all, Sabka Vikas kind of the philosophy. With this, I would like to thank the
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that great sum up. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we won't have time for questions. Perhaps if you have questions, you can address them directly to speakers once we come off the dais. Before we move towards the closure, just, we had one perspective of D2D from Shivaji, which I shared with all of you in your absence, unfortunately, direct to dais. But I think one thing that I've seen, which perhaps can be another definition of direct to device, is when we, I mean, most of us, I guess, have children, and this present generation, once they get up, the first thing that happens is direct to device. So with that, I'd like to close this, and thank you very much for being such a patient audience.
Thank you for a highly insightful session, and I request the chair, moderator, speakers present on stage to please join us for a group photograph. Ladies and gentlemen, may we have a warm round of applause for our distinguished panel. Thank you.